Well, welcome and good day, everyone. We, of course, are glad you guys could join us again for another Talk It Over. Today with me, I have Dave and Carolyn, so welcome.
Thank
Glad
you.
you guys could join today. Second in our message series about parenting kids. I know we both, of course, have kids, varying ages, but I thought it was a really good message today.
It was excellent.
Kind of unpacking a little bit of what it looks like to be parenting in a world where things aren't the way they maybe need to be. So I felt that was quite good. But before we dive too far, how are your weeks been? How have things been going for you guys recently?
It's just been busy. We're back in routine, right?
Yep.
So before the Christmas rush hits.
Yes.
So we've got a little bit of a breather and then it's going to get a little crazy. So right now it's been good.
Yeah, work's been busy and we both doing a business together. So that always adds excitement.
Just another level, right?
And we're getting ready for family wedding in December. So
Yes.
I'm getting excited about that, hosting a virtual bridal shower next week, which is a
Wow.
great advantage to Zoom.
Yes.
People from far away can still celebrate.
Can all be a part of it. Exactly.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, again, it's been busy. Work's been really busy, and it's going to continue to get more busy as we get into that snow tire season. That's going to be a continuing ramp up as we lead into the rest of the month of November, but we'll get through it. And then, we're only
6 weeks?
6 weeks, 7 weeks to Christmas now.
Your
Something
wife
like
told
that.
me 6 weeks.
Which is crazy. It's crazy how fast that seems to have come up, but it's been good. So staying busy, but yeah. So let us know, guys, in the comments what that looked like for you. How were your weeks? Maybe you had something real exciting, something fun, or maybe it's just generic routine, just kind of going through the same thing at the moment, nothing too exciting. But please let us know. Our verse today comes from Proverbs 13:20. Walk with the wise and become wise. Associate with fools and get in trouble. And I think that kind of follows along with a few messages Craig's talked about the people that are around us, who you associate with, who's that influence in you. I think certainly can be bigger than maybe what we think it is on that influence. And I think that's just really, really good. 3 gifts to give your children. I like how Craig kind of touched on that. A community worth having, a standard worth achieving, and a faith worth sharing. I really liked those 3 values. I thought those were quite good.
They're very good.
And things to look for and things to maybe instill in the kids that we, maybe not necessarily just our own kids, but kids that we come across, throughout our day, because it's very important for them to have a strong foundation in something that's true and good. Our first question today: what is the last great gift you received, and what made it so memorable?
Well, it's hard because there are some small gifts you get that you appreciate because of the thought behind it.
Yep.
And then there's some really extravagant gifts. You're like, wow, I can't believe you got that for me.
Yep.
And you got both of those, right? I've got lots of those because my family's been very generous with me that way. And so I appreciate that.
Yep.
And I like both. So it could be a really small thing, like it got you this little thing that you're going to use all the time.
Yep.
Or it could have been something significant like a new iPad or something big, new guitars, tools, all kinds of stuff that kind of run the gamut.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. They all kind of have their place.
Gotcha.
Yeah, for me, I think when you first read this question, it was a trip to Florida to visit my niece for her in-person bridal shower and be able to surprise her. Dave's going to be marrying them, so he got to meet with them in person, which was so much nicer. And it was just a great getaway. And to fly a new airline that we both enjoyed. So it was nice.
Awesome. Yeah, I think for me it was the Make-A-Wish trip that we just got back from. I think that's probably the most recent one. And just, again, it being so memorable, just the time we could spend with Emmett and have him at a point where he's healthy enough to enjoy all the activities in Disney, and just that he could experience it and not be restricted by his dialysis and other, all the other medical things he's had going on. And I think that just made it more memorable that he could just enjoy and not have to be kind of held back, which was excellent and created, of course, a lot of memories there and things we are, I'm sure, going to continue to talk about for years to come. And he's already mentioned he'd like to go back and do more. and experience more things.
Sure, you would. Yeah.
There's so much there to experience. It's hard to get it all done in a week.
Can we do it weekly, Dad?
Just about.
Yeah.
It's just about. I'm not ready to leave yet. Can we go back again and do some more? No, we have to go home. But yeah, I think it's a good stepping point that we can continue to do fun things like that with him and remember that he's able to do things and not think that he's unable or can't. So that was a good step in that direction for us, and certainly really enjoyed that time together as a family. It's just been really, really good. All right, so thinking about the message Craig was talking about today, was there a part of it that was really impactful for you, something that stood out more than anything else?
Yeah, for me, it was that reminder that you can't just give your kids empty praises.
Yeah.
The way of matching it with the behaviors that you want to see in them. And I think so often as a parent, I like to rescue and just encourage. But if there's no depth to that encouragement, it's pretty shallow. And this sniffing out a fake. I think our boys are very good at that. And I appreciated that this generation wants authenticity and to just be authentic.
Yeah, I think that's hard because our society is wanting to just reaffirm everything. Like he talks about, like don't give a participation award. Like you should show up. That's the basis of it all. Yeah. So you don't get rewarded for that. It's about the efforts that you make. And yeah, I thought that was pretty powerful too. I think that's hard because as a parent, you're just constantly wanting to spoil your kids and gift your kids. And so it makes it challenging to not sometimes to wait and say, if you've done these behaviors, those are really Christ-like and I love that and affirm them for it. But otherwise, no, you have to hold off.
Yeah, it's a challenge. It really is a challenge. And seeing parents, again, medically complex kids and wanting to give them just everything because it's been so hard for them. I can certainly find myself at that point. There was points where it was like, you just want them to have the best and more because they've had a hard or a tough time. Yeah. And it just makes it, it feeds into that. And me and Leanne, we kind of discussed that ahead of time, knowing some of the complications and things that could be difficult for him and not wanting him to feel the sense of entitlement or start putting that into him as a little kid, feeling that he should get things or have stuff or be entitled to things because of his situation. Yeah. And of course, it makes it difficult because you see them in pain, you see them hurting, or you see, and you want to rescue, you want to fix it, right? Or
even make up for it.
Or make up for it. Yeah, that's
because you had hard things. I'm going to give you extra
now
to kind of balance it out a little bit.
Yeah, and so having that kind of pre-discussion ahead of time that we don't want to add to that, we don't want to make him seem more entitled or have him standing out more than other kids because of that. We wanted him to feel like one of the other kids, that he had the same thing. And trying to work on that, praise them when they're doing the right things, but not reward them for just showing up. I'm totally with Craig in that, where I can't stand the whole, you showed up, here's a trophy. Like, you're not helping them in any way. You're not building any confidence in them to try to actually do better or be better or compete in anything. It's just, I get something because I'm just here. It makes it hard.
It does. And you see that in the work ethic, right? Of like, hey, I showed up for work, opposed to, of course you showed up for work, right? Like it doesn't help them long term.
I showed up on time. Where's the party?
Right? Yeah, exactly.
I should get a gold sticker for that, right?
Here's the red carpet.
At work.
Yeah.
And they're, no, of course you're supposed to be here.
That's part of the work, right? Is being here on time, right? And unfortunately, it's seen a big shift in that, where you're starting to see more people feel entitled to that gold sticker. Hey, I got here, or I wasn't late today, so now that's even more, right? Like, so things like that, and seeing that. So, looking at it where it's like, no, we need to be praising them for what they're doing, but not necessarily rewarding them for doing the minimum.
Yeah.
Right.
And I like that reminder not to praise them for being beautiful or smart, or I've seen that happen to so many kids where then they look at a bigger pool and all of a sudden, wait a second, I was valued because of that characteristic and opposed to the hard work or the effort. It's a really good reminder.
Yeah, and it can certainly be crushing to confidence when you end up in that situation and all of a sudden, well, now I'm not the smartest or I'm not the right in that bigger pool. And all of a sudden now you have kids wondering, well, what was that a lie? Were they lying to me all these years? Well, am I really not this? And really stirring up a self-doubt and making them very questioning a lot of decisions or things that were decided. And it feeds into the anxiety. It feeds into things that continue to keep building and making it, again, you're adding more obstacles for these kids than what they need to. And again, handing them things, as Craig talked about, another piece is just handing them more responsibility than like they're ready for. Like they're just not ready for that. And his illustration was like a phone or a device that access to everything. They can be reading things, the wars, things that are happening, and really can't comprehend everything that's going on. And again, just adding more to the complication of them just being able to be a kid and enjoy just being a kid, right?
See, that's a different way of looking at things that I think comes from a Christ-centered perspective. And we had that with our kids before really cell phones were a big deal.
Yeah.
And it was things like we want to limit their exposure to movies and TV shows and media.
Yep.
Because again, they shouldn't be facing those kinds of things or be exposed to them as a child. We want to protect them from that.
Yeah.
And there are lots of parents who that's not a priority.
No.
We were talking about that. Like when you let your kids hang out with this family member or this neighbor, and they're like, yeah, you watch whatever you want. Or that the adult is saying, well, I'm going to watch my show, and the kids are welcome to sit in and watch it too.
Yeah.
And it's dealing with topics that are just not appropriate for kids.
Yeah. And
so you're not protecting them. And you're giving them freedom then to be exposed to things that are going to damage them psychologically for years and years to come, and could lead to all kinds of addictions and struggles and all kinds of anxiety.
Yeah, exactly. And as Craig was explaining, right, that we start with, giving more to God as they get older and older, and keep building into God and less of us and more of God until they get to the point where they're God-centered, and now they have the tool and the responsibility now that they can manage on their own because they've had that Christ-centered home, which has brought that as the forefront, which makes a huge difference. And certainly for me, coming from a family that didn't have that originally, that wasn't part of the center, and seeing the difference from like when I was a kid to what we're doing for Emmett, and how that family dynamic and how that's changed and what is the center is very different than what I grew up with. Now, again, cell phones and things weren't, around when I was younger, but again, you start seeing some of that stuff pop up, and hey, I want to go check this out, and internet stuff and messaging chats and things that were all started coming, right?
I think that came at the tail end. So that was just coming in as our kids were kind of crossing over to that junior high, well, maybe high school age.
Yep.
And we probably could have done more. I don't think we were aware at the beginning of like, what are we exposing our kids to? Like how much is out there? And we probably could have done more to limit some of that as it was coming in. I think now we're aware, very aware.
Yeah, much more actually.
Right? Yeah. Like, okay, what can they be accessed with and how bad can it be?
Yep.
So setting those boundaries with devices, I think is pretty wise.
It is. Yeah. And I agree. I think more aware now than ever what's out there, what's available, what's being, what's being pushed and such. It makes it better for us to be able to be more equipped to monitor that and make sure kids have the safe spaces, safe things to be doing without being exposed to stuff that's way past them and of course can be damaging for sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's read Matthew 7:11. So if you sinful people know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your heavenly Father give good gifts to those who ask him? So we all, of course, want to give what's best for our kids in our lives. How can we know what gifts are good?
That's a challenge. And because our culture, again, is bombarding us with, here's what good gifts look like. It's like freedom, it's access, it's toys, it's activities, it's praise. Like, these are the good gifts.
Yep.
I think we have to default to, what does Jesus say are good gifts?
Mm-hmm.
What are things that are actually helpful and are building up for our kids? And are really going to help them to become, as you were saying, dependent on God and really Christ-centered, because that'll be the healthiest life they can live.
Yep.
And that's really different. And because it's so countercultural, we really need to be reminding each other, and that's really not the way to go. Because the pressure of the people around us, the school system, the society, it's all saying, no, go with what we say is building up.
Mm-hmm.
And that leads to, we talked about entitled kids, or kids who are psychologically really hurt, or who are just lost and lonely.
Yeah, and I think for me, it's that whole idea that COVID really put a stress on parents, right? And locking people down and forgetting community, and doing it in community is so important.
Mm-hmm.
And having connections with other adults that are healthy and being involved in that, right? And I think young families were so stressed out. They're like, well, this person's willing to help, so I'm just going to let them help. And Dave and I've had to, in our parenting, be very specific, like, who are our kids going to spend time with, and who's going to have them overnight, and who's going to connect with them on that intimacy level, right? And it's just taking the time to be wise, right? And not just assuming because someone offered that's the right thing. And sometimes as a people pleaser, like, oh, but they're being so kind. It's like, but that being kind doesn't mean it's wise, which means more discussions and more trying to figure out what the right situation is.
It is. And certainly I'm starting to see it more now with some of the younger families that have kids, of course, Emmett's age, and just kind of watching, and what's the dynamic, and how does the family operate, and is that going to be a good place for him to go, and hey, can I go hang out with these friends? Is that going to be a good household? Is that going to be a good environment for Emmett? And certainly with, of course, all the bombardment of, live for yourself, make sure you're happy, make sure you're comfortable, seeing that in some of the families, and how it's so divided that you can be married, but they're almost two separate people. And then I'm like, is that going to be healthy for him to be in that environment for a sleepover? Is that going to be good for him? What's going to be in that discussion in that household? Like, what's right? And it's difficult. It really is difficult to really kind of make your way through what's going to be positive for him, and what's going to be God honoring for him, what's going to be like those kind of choices. And it's getting more and more difficult, but I'm finding it easier to see. Okay. Like, even years ago, I didn't see it as much. And now, again, just the journey that we've taken and continuing to put God first, it's becoming more visible where people stand, what people are about. And it's certainly, if you're making unwise choices, you're going to end up with really bad things. It's just, it's all a part of it, right? And we're a part of bringing Emmett up, but it's about community. And so the people that are around Emmett a lot, of course, is our church family, our small groups, people who have, again, Christ-centered families that focus on that we can trust and know he's going to have the right influence, the right input, all that built into him. So as he gets older, we know he's going to have that first, that he can be responsible and go out and know he's going to make responsible choices, or more responsible choices in that sense, right?
And that, I think back to our kids where, we were probably not the favorite parents because we would rather have our kids bring the kids to our place, right? Yep. So a lot of times our place would be where a lot of kids are hanging up, and a lot of times we had very different views of what our kids were allowed to do. But now as they're gotten older, I think they look back and go, wow, that was pretty wise. But at the time, Dave was really helpful for me to say, no, this is the right thing to do, even though they're not happy, right? Because when you take those stances and you say no, depending on your kid's determination, it can be exhausting.
Which is what Craig talked about, right? You're not your child's peer.
No, not at all.
You're their parent, and so sometimes they're going to be unhappy. It's the value we talked about as a church this morning, which you give up things you love for things you love even more. So I'm going to give up the momentary, my kid is happy with me,
Yeah.
Like, I'm going to give that up because I know down the road, it's really going to be beneficial for them, for me to set boundaries that they don't like.
Yeah, that peer, I think that's where a lot of parents are now. They're at the point of let's be friends, not a parent-child. Yeah. And again, it changes the dynamic of authority. So, well, if they're my friend, I don't really have to listen to them. I don't have to take advice because they're just like a friend. Right. Over you've got a parent that's very, no, this is not how things go. This isn't, I'm not here to continually make you happy. We have to make wise choices. You may not agree with them all, but again, as you said, later on down the road, they're going to look back and be like, well, actually, that probably was good. And yeah, it's sometimes hard when you're looking at an 8-year-old who's not happy because of a decision that as parents we've made, and just gets very frustrated and upset, and have to let him just, have his moment, and then kind of come back to it, and then sit down and talk a little bit more through it. Maybe even just to help them understand a little bit more, but it can be hard because you shift into almost, okay, well, I need to make this better now because I've made it bad. Let's make it better. But sometimes you can't fix it. You have to let it sit for a minute and come back for them to have a moment to process what you were talking about. But it's difficult with media and everything else that's out there now at the moment, trying to push very different views on what needs to be the focus.
Well, and the idea that's being pushed is your child knows best about so much for themselves. Go with what they say.
Yeah.
Which is not consistent, because you would say, like, can I make this choice around like getting a tattoo or something? You'd be like, no, you can't do that. Well, can I make this choice that's life altering? Sure. Yeah. You must know best for yourself.
You must know best. Yeah.
And as a parent, it's like, no, I've got to guard that for you until you're old enough to make those choices for yourself.
Yeah.
And it makes you very unpopular.
Yes.
And I think too, it's causing anxiety. Like, as a developmental occupational therapist, kids need structure and routines and need to know limits. And when those are inconsistent or confusing, it's really, really hard. And society seems to be balking against it. But at the same time, we know that kids benefit from that nurture and that structure of consistency.
Yeah.
Right? Whether it's a child with medical needs or it's a neuroatypical or neurotypical child, they all need that structure and routine and to know where that line is.
It is.
Boundaries are so important.
It is. And the unpopular parent, you start to see it more and more is because you're not like the fun parent or the fun family. And you gotta get that sense, that feeling that you're the odd duck. Yeah. But I know being an odd duck, it's okay because what I'm doing is what God wants me to do. So I don't have a problem with that. But some people might, and they would just give into whatever, right? And it's interesting. Yeah, it's this whole live free, be free, do whatever. And the structure is what we need.
It's a value system that some people have. And it's what we talked about. And what Craig emphasizes over and over, which I think we have learned is so valuable, is who's around my kid.
Yeah, for sure.
What kind of influence are they having? And looking back, that's probably the thing we would have done more of.
Yeah.
So we did a lot of that. I think we would have done even more of being intentional about who are they hanging out with and who's spending time with our kids closely a lot. And Craig even went so far as like, we're going to pick people that we want to be in our lives because of their impact on our children.
Yeah, their values and impact.
We're gonna pick those, and we never took it that far, so we limited people, but it wasn't like, ooh, we need that.
Yeah.
And I think we would have done more of that looking back for our boys. That would have been really helpful.
Yeah. Craig mentioned that about your kids may pick the friend, but you can pick the group that's in, right?
That's
like
right.
Where that is. Because we don't always get to have the decision of who they get to be around, like in that sense, who they're picking, but we can get them into a group where, you're going to have a good influence. Like Craig mentioned, the soccer had a great team, like best team, but horrible values, lesser team, but Christ-centered, and had to make, of course, that tough decision, which I'm sure for him and his son was very difficult to make. To try to shift into a different team, but that team is going to be much better long term than it was in the short term, right? So, certainly, of course, a great message today, and just is a great thing for parenting, and just a great way to continue to remember we need to keep God centered as the focus of what we do each and every day. Whether we're single, family, kids, whatever that is, we just need to remember that God needs to be the first and the center of each of our days. We've run at the end of our time here. This has, of course, been a great discussion. And you guys, of course, can have those discussions as well. You guys can start a life group, you two friends, and of course can dive into these questions even deeper than we have today, and get more out of it with the people in your lives. So I encourage you guys to do that if you haven't already. And of course, we want to thank the tech team behind us, of course, making everything we see here all possible, and just getting it up and ready for you guys to be a part of what we do. And of course, we want to thank Dave, Carolyn, again for joining me today. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. And we want to remember, whoever finds God,
Finds life.